Hi, everybody. We've got a great panel this afternoon. Andrew teed it up a little bit, but I couldn't hear very well what he said backstage. So I'm just going to introduce it by saying that I think you got a bit of a sense from Jilsey and Noel's presentation what an amazing success the brigades are. And I think the brigades are part of this really large and diverse community that constitutes a movement of civic tech. And we celebrate all of that enormous success, as Noel said, and we also struggle. We also think about all the ways in which this needs to be sustained, and we think about our impact. And I do think that this year was a year of a lot of questioning and self-criticism and self-reflection. We're asking ourselves, what are our goals and how we should be measuring ourselves? And because it's such an amazing, diverse group of people working on different angles of civic tech and government that works better in the 21st century, we don't agree always on those measures. So we never really know exactly as a movement how we stand up, how we measure up to each other. Should it be apps? Should it be adoption of the apps? Should it be open data? Should it be really the community that we build together and the ways that we break down boundaries between the citizens and the people in government, community groups, on all of the issues that we care about? Is it the resilience that we create? So we're going to talk about that in the context of the growth of our ecosystem and the movement. And I have a fantastic panel who's going to come discuss that. So let's start with the amazing Stacy Donohue. She's an investment partner with the Omidyar network. Hi, come on in, have a seat. Stacy is not just a Code for America board member from the very beginning, really been there since sort of pre-day one, minus several. And she's on a number of other boards, including change.org, and she leads Omidyar's civic tech investing globally. So she's all over the world all the time. Our next panelist is Andrew Rasiej. Are we doing the music again? I can't tell. Okay, I didn't give Stacy a hug, just to get left out, but you're getting one because I knew because I didn't know you were coming out. I'm sorry. Andrew has also been a friend and advisor since the very beginning, since before Code for America when we were doing Gov 2.0. He wears a number of hats. He's the founder and CEO of Civic Hall, which is my New York home. Don't tell my parents there. They live in New York. They think I stay with them. Personal Democracy Forum, which is an event we all love, and many of us here go to. Best event of the year, other than this one, sorry. And the founder and chairman of New York Tech Meetup, and really connected to sort of every bit of the civic tech ecosystem. Our third panelist is Sheba Najmi. Come on, Sheba. I met Sheba, you get a hug too, when she was a fellow in 2012. This was the second year of Code for America, and she came and worked with the city and county of Honolulu, did an amazing project that really did bring the community together in a way that I had never seen before. Fantastic. She has since gone on to found Code for Pakistan, does amazing work there, and also is a UX strategist for Exigy. Our final panelist, yes, Exigy. Our final panelist is my own mayor, Libby Schaaf, fantastic leader in our community and great friend to Code for America also. Hi, have a seat. So Libby was on council when we started all this stuff, and we met her because she was championing open data. I think she was really the first council person to take this on, ended up co-authoring the open data policy for Oakland by co-creating it with our community. And then decided to champion bringing a Code for America fellowship team to Oakland. She also wants me to tell you that CFA is her happy place. And Oakland is my happy place. So thanks all for joining. I'm going to have a seat now. And we're going to start off with just a couple general questions, and I want you all to chime in quite a bit. But we're going to start with this idea of, I don't know how anyone else is counting. I actually count CFA is now 6 years, but let's call this for a minute 5 years of this movement, just because that's a nice even number there. Oh, I'm sorry, it's an odd number, but it's a nice round number. In 5 years, what are the significant impacts that we've made, and what do they look like? And Sheba, I'd like you to kick us off, because I know you've given a lot of thought to this.
Thank you, Jen. It's wonderful to be here. I'm going to focus on international. Globally, I think the first milestone has been the movement, because without the people and the energy, nothing can happen. Code for America provided a new civic tech model to a handful of isolated organizations that were doing transparency work internationally. But I think what's most impressive is that it inspired civic engagement in countries where it wasn't even in the national consciousness, like Pakistan and Romania and Mexico City. And what's particularly remarkable about that is that these are countries of, across variable democracy and corruption of government and terrorism and security and digital development and wealth and poverty. And so in the last 5 years, we've seen civic tech work start in places from the Caribbean to Ghana to Taiwan. And so now there's something like 20 country-level programs just within our Code for All network. Within those programs, there are many, many cities that have their local chapters. So Hal Seki, who's the founder of Code for Japan, he said this to me. He said that a few years ago, before they started their work, if you were to Google civic tech in katakana, the only search results you would get were for Honda Civic. And
oh, really?
And now there are, something like 68 brigades in Japan. And similarly, Code for Germany has 25 community labs all across the country. And there are many more in the civic tech ecosystem that we're not even aware of. So just this week, I first heard about Code for Nepal because they'd submitted a pull request to Code for South Africa for an open source tool that they have. And so none of us in the Code for All group had heard of them, and we looked them up, and we discovered that they've been doing amazing work for 2.5 years, just silently off by themselves. So the pace of the momentum is really striking.
Sheba, let's take a second here and say, if you're if you're in a Code 4 group around the world, could you just please stand up for a minute? Okay, there's a lot of you guys. Awesome, thank you.
And it's also extraordinary that despite the diversity of contexts, cultural, economic, and political contexts, these organizations all try to adhere to certain core values like open source code and citizen empowerment, which have become shared hallmarks of the civic tech movement. So the spread of the ecosystem across contexts has been phenomenal globally. And especially when you recognize that this is a largely volunteer community, which requires a significant amount of time and effort in person to be put in. So now that we've got the growth, now we have to think of the new goal, because the end goal can't be the movement. It's got to be about improving public services and the way they work in our communities. And this new goal is a lot harder to measure impact in because it involves changing government practices, which takes a long time. And it's hard to attribute to any one intervention. But there, too, we're seeing a lot of great stuff. So, for instance, in Australia, they're bringing together the public and private sector through their academy program. In Pakistan, our fellowship program is about to launch its 3rd year, and it's grown to 20 full-time fellows partnered with government. And in South Africa, Code for South Africa has created a number of tools that are really powerful in terms of government transparency and accountability. And one of them opens up legal parliamentary information and makes it available, and it gets 80,000 unique users a month. So these are just a couple of examples from the Code for All network. Besides the Code for All movement, there are government digital services starting from Canada to Singapore. And I think we really need to celebrate all these successes. I think that what's also important to keep in mind is that internationally, this movement is a lot more nascent. And so all this amazing stuff is just taking off.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Now, Stacy, I know you work around the world a lot, too. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, to build on that. So I think the growth in international has been phenomenal. And the growth in the US, let's not forget, has also been phenomenal. So we commissioned a report a few months ago with an organization called Purpose that gathered a lot of pretty interesting data around the growth of civic tech over the last 3 years, 2013, 14, and 15. And one of the things they found was that civic tech is growing not just on the coasts of the US, which we might expect, but really growing across the United States. And evidence for that was the fact that meetups grew 81% during that time period, but are now held in 46 out of 50 states. So I think that's a really interesting data point to just show that this isn't just about kind of a few set of active technologists in large cities on the two coasts, but this really is a grassroots effort that's being led in no small part by the Code for America brigades, clearly. So shout out to the brigades. They've been a tremendous asset.
Solidarity.
Exactly. So I think, to Sheba's point, the movement has been building quite a bit. But in addition to just kind of movement building, there's also been some impact that's very measurable. And there are several companies in this space that have really hit some interesting milestones. And I'll just highlight one, which is SeeClickFix. I don't know if anyone from SeeClickFix is here. Woo! Has now surpassed 2.5 million issues fixed since inception. So, one of the things that I'm sure we'll talk about is the scale of civic tech, and are we scaling? And I would submit to you that while it's taken a few years, that it is starting to scale in certain areas, and we've got to do more to identify those points of scale so that we can understand them and learn from them.
So Libby, as a mayor, you have a unique perspective on what this progress looks like for your city, our city. Do you want to comment on sort of what you think the big impacts have been for Oakland?
Sure. If I look back 5 years ago, it felt like civic tech was something that was on the outside trying to get into government. Whether it was, the fellows from Code for America that were going to come in with their bright, shiny ideas for a year, or even our incredible brigade in Oakland, Open Oakland, who is, putting up these websites, but they were always from the outside. And now, we've tried to rebrand city workers by calling them fantasticrats. Doesn't that sound sexy? So our fantasticrats now get this, and they are excited about innovation. They're excited about utilizing technology. They would not dream of producing a budget that Open Oakland couldn't put up through their visualization on their website. So I see the excitement and the culture change. I mean, you remember I said at the end of our fellowship year, with all due respect to our internationally award-winning app that you created for us, Record Track, it was actually the least valuable thing that Code for America did for Oakland. The most valuable thing was the culture change. I think we have a lot more ways to go. And I'll just throw one other thing that's different in 5 years.
Okay.
Yesterday, Reid Hoffman thanked me for throwing myself on the hand grenade of public service. It matters. This sounds a little self-serving, so I apologize for that. But it matters who your leaders are.
It does.
And so you took somebody who was a nerd about your stuff, about civic tech. And, there might have been a little vodka involved. But, you, John Lyman from Google, you Code for America junkies were the people that gave me the idea of becoming the mayor of my city. Mm-hmm. So think about that. The people that you want leading your city are not the people who have already decided that this is their God-given right in life. They're the people that are sitting in this audience, and you need to actually help them see themselves in these leadership positions, because if you want to talk about taking tech to the next level, leadership does matter. And so, we all need a little pushing and quite a bit of vodka to throw ourselves onto the grenade of public service.
The grenade. I'm going to totally applaud you for that, and also say that's exactly what Tom Loosemore said the other morning, find the right politician. In our case, you were on council, you were a politician, but we are so glad that we encouraged you to do that. It's very well said. So Andrew, I don't know whether you're going to take a New York angle, a global angle, but you have a vision across this ecosystem.
So it's an honor to be here. So first of all, it's actually really, really amazing for those of us who were here at the beginning of CFA and those who were at early PDF to see how incredibly large and diverse this community has become over the last several years, how many public-private partnerships there are between public officials who get it now, how many open data projects have now started to bear fruit that can be scaled and measured to some degree. And as enthusiastic as I am about that, I have to say that I'm extremely worried too, because I'm worried that we're not going to be able to scale any of this due to the fact that the politics that we have are so dysfunctional that they actually deliver to us this government that we are trying to help fix. And the idea that all these innovations that either we bring to government or these open data projects that citizens and civic technologists work on are going to somehow trickle up and create a more pluralistic society, a more pluralistic democracy, I think is a false narrative that we need to face. A large cohort of our community actually needs to be working on new mechanisms and platforms for democracy to work better, for our politics to work better, or otherwise we're going to fail at all these projects to scale because they are not going to join an ecosystem that is parallel to the kind of openness and pluralism that we are all working towards. Now, I know a little bit about nonpartisan events. Personal Democracy Forum is nonpartisan, we're nonpartisan, but I think that there's something incredibly wrong in the normalization of the bullying of women, journalists, and underserved communities in politics. And there's no bigger threat. This is not about Republicans and Democrats. There is no bigger threat to the ecosystem of civic tech, gov tech, urban tech than Donald Trump as President of the United States. And I know all of us are excited about the projects here. All of us are excited about the relationships that we're building here. But we have an election in 6 days that will render much of our work naught unless we stop the politics of destruction from becoming part of the norm. That is a responsibility of everybody who's interested in gov tech, civic tech, and fairness, not only in America, but around the world. So I'm putting the elephant in the room on the table, everybody. We should all make sure that that gentleman does not, I'm sorry, he's not a gentleman, that person does not become President of the United States. I'm sorry.
It's a big, big table holding an elephant there. I thank you for bringing it out. I'm going to push you, though, Andrea, back to you, because I know those are, so my next question really is going to be about challenges, and I think you've spoken to the biggest challenge that we face, and there are others in there that you also spoke to, too, in terms of the diversity of our movement. But I want to push you on what you think we have achieved in the past 5 years. What are the things you're most hopeful and excited about?
Well, what I'm mostly excited about is the fact that technology isn't no longer about who's got the best technology. It's really about who's got the most diverse group of individuals and partnerships to be able to work together to solve problems that used to be worked on in silos. So the kinds of collaborations that we're seeing were unheard of, and the kinds of relationships that we can have with public officials like Libby are now the norm, more the norm than the exception to the rule. We have a president who's about to leave office who has made civic tech to be a major goal of his to focus on in a post-presidency. I think that's going to add a huge amount of fuel or wind to our sails in that regard. So, I'm excited about the fact that it's not Silicon Valley's being created everywhere. There are literally civic tech communities being born everywhere because these tools have become more ubiquitous, more easier to use, and less expensive to try to build. And we have more examples, many of them represented throughout the conference here the last 3 days, that can be replicated. Yeah. So I'm, as concerned as I was what I said before, I'm extremely optimistic about the future of civic tech, gov tech, and the idea of a more pluralistic and connected society.
Yeah. So let's get to the challenges. Other than Trump, Stacy, top 2 challenges for this community.
Okay, so that was a big one. I think there are a few others. So first of all is our perspective is that civic tech really lacks a shared identity right now and vision. And that's a real problem because when you don't all know if you are, proceeding towards the same goal or what you have in common, and you can't describe what it is you're trying to accomplish, it's very hard to attract talent and get other people to join you. And it's also hard to attract capital, which is another one of the challenges in this space, both in the nonprofit, foundation sector and also in the for-profit or venture capital sector. So I think that is something that we really need to address. We like to kind of cast a wide net on what's included in civic tech, but we also need to sort of crystallize in our own minds what it is that we're talking about. I think that the second challenge for the civic tech movement that is certainly addressable, but is a gap right now, is that there's no body of information about the impact of civic tech and what are the outcomes of the things that we're producing. And that's really important, again, not only to attract capital to the sector, but also to be able to learn from what we're doing. And when you see how other sectors have evolved over time, like financial inclusion, for example, there's this period of kind of chaos and everyone kind of doing their own thing. But eventually, in order to get scale, there are some sorts of kind of industry associations or bodies that gather information and learning and data about the impact of the sector that allows it to grow. And so one of the things that I'm really excited about is the work that Civic Hall is doing to start pulling together that kind of research about what is working and what is not working in civic tech, because I think that will benefit all of us. So to summarize, the challenges around identity and information on impact.
I'm going to strongly agree with your second point, but it's hard to be at an event like this and at PDF, frankly, and not feel that there is an identity. I mean, people seem to feel a sense of being in a tribe. I think what we're missing is the common measures, right? We have, and even if you look here on stage, Georgia talking about taking unemployment in New Orleans, talking about numbers actually changing. It's just a lot of little stories, and it's really hard to, it's not a little story, it's a big story, but it's a lot of individual stories in a lot of different places where the measures are different.
Yeah.
How do you guys measure it? How do you hold yourselves accountable? What's the measure for Code for All?
Yeah, I think that for Code for All in particular, what's interesting is that there are lots of different models that have worked in different places. So the same model doesn't work everywhere. So in some places, there might be, for instance, the fellowship model that has taken root with government, like in Pakistan and in Australia. In Germany, the fellowship model didn't work, but the brigades worked. In Taiwan, it's a largely online community of over 2,000 civic hackers.
So each of these are going to have their different numbers that they're shooting for.
Yeah, exactly. So each of these have different measures and different numbers, but I think the common identity or the common goal is around empowering citizens. It's around improving public services to make citizens' lives better. And the way to do that is obviously you have to make government better.
Yeah.
Right?
Andrew, what do you think the measure should be?
Well, clearly, more standardized data and mechanisms for us to be able to actually compare results, whether they are local, national, or international. That's already been said. I also think that we're still measuring individual projects as opposed to looking at infrastructure. And I think one of the bigger challenges for this entire field is that we need 20, 30, 40 Reid Hoffmans to be investing in this field. There's not enough money in this field for it to be able to measure itself, because people will fund programs and not the measurements, or lay infrastructure that allows a lot of these projects to scale once they've shown success.
Yeah.
And it's not fair that Omidyar and Knight and Ford and a few other, MacArthur and Hewler, are the only real foundations funding this kind of work. We need more funding, particularly from the robber barons in the tech community, who have got a lot more money than any of us. Anil Dash said something very interesting the other day about the issue of diversity in tech. When Facebook needed to make a decision about buying Instagram, they decided in 5 days, they were deliberate about spending $22 billion.
Yeah.
If they were deliberate, if the entire tech industry was deliberate about solving the diversity issues in our communities, they would be spending a lot more money, and it's all incremental. We need to fix that problem too.
I have to give it up to the New Yorkers. I mean, Noel asks for money, Rasiej asks for money on stage. Way to go. That's great.
Hey, Andrew, I'm just going to pick up on that point about funding to say that, our belief is that there's never going to be enough philanthropic capital in the world to continue to fund all that needs to be funded in civic tech. And so it's also really important that we find business models that work here. And one of the trends that we're seeing is that there actually are more and more for-profit entrepreneurs entering this space who are finding business models, and that will attract venture capital. And that's a very untapped source of funding at this point. You see a few firms starting to do a few transactions in this space, and we're really interested in getting more investors to start thinking about civic tech as an investable space to help address that funding gap, because it really is severe and one of the big barriers to scale.
Yeah, I think the for-profit, nonprofit, there's a whole big mix, and it's got to all come together. I have done a terrible job of managing our time, though. I loved what everybody had to say. We're running on the clock, but I want to give Libby the last word. Where do you want to see this go? What's next for us in 5 years?
I guess for me, it's not so much, the fancy app or how much money something's getting. It's what is the outcome. And at the end of the day, I think we all need to pay a lot more attention to equity. We have to hold ourselves accountable in government for not just creating equal opportunities, but actual equal results. And when I look at whether people are healthy, wealthy, and wise in my city, which are 3 very basic measures, the disparities are outrageous. And I don't think we're ever going to solve that unless we have more people that are actually involved with coming up with those solutions that come from the communities that are most impacted from those solutions. I know you referenced that as well, but we've got to hold ourselves to the results, the outcomes, and see what those look like. Everything else is shiny distraction.
Well, I think that has been a really great theme of this year. I have seen that talked about more this year in our community than ever, and I've seen people really holding themselves accountable to it, and I know we're not there yet, but I do appreciate that this panel has all brought up those themes and that everybody in this room seems to be thinking about it. So we're going to check in on this again next year, and in the meantime, let's thank this amazing panel.
Thank you.